Good morning. I am going to pause for a moment here as people are rolling in. Welcome this morning. Hope you all have your cups of coffee so that we can stay focused and enjoy this morning. Glad you're here. I'm just going to give another few seconds here to give people a chance as I'm seeing that they're rolling in. People are continuing to come in. Welcome this morning. My name is 𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙯𝙯, and welcome to the Minnesota Crossroads Career Network webinar this morning. We have a few different things. We've got Melanie Martz is supposed to be talking on interviewing for success this morning and help you in the process there. I have been, Melanie, like me, has been a recruiter for a very long time and has interviewed, I don't know, probably thousands of people over the years, and has gotten some great insight into this. I've done the same, and I know she'll bring a lot to this. I'll be honest, as Melanie has not, she was supposed to join me online earlier here and to be ready to go, and she has not joined me yet online, and so I'm hopeful here that she's going to join us shortly. I do have the presentation. I've done it before myself, and I've got I've also interviewed a ton of people, so we certainly can cover the topic, but Melanie is much more compelling than I am. And so I am hopeful that she'll join us here shortly. But in the meantime, I've got a little bit of stuff to share and a short video for you that I hope is going to be inspiring and helpful in this process for you as well. And then we'll jump into the main topic on interviewing shortly after that. Again, my name's 𝙤𝙬𝙧𝙯𝙯. I lead Crossroads Career Network. We've been doing this here in the Minneapolis area for 20 years now, over 20 years. And I'm really grateful. I just did some math last night and looking up registrations. We've had over 960 some people that have taken part in different things that we offer through Crossroads over this past year. I'm really grateful for that. Actually, it's quite a bit more than that because those were 963 new people, and there's a number of others that have come back that had been involved with Crossroads in the past as well. But part of our hope with Crossroads is that while we're focused on helping you succeed in your job search, we also always want to point to the hope and encouragement of Jesus Christ. Whenever I think that I may be getting closer to fully understanding God and what he's doing in my life, there are verses in the Bible that remind me that I'm barely scratching the surface. In the book of Job, he had gone through terrible things in his life and questioned what God was doing. God responded by pointing out the magnitude of who he is and what he's done. In one passage, Job says, behold, these are just the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? You know, the Bible tells us that God's ways are not our ways, and he's so far beyond anything I can imagine. He sees everything I don't see and capable of so much more than I think is possible. Excuse me. My throat's been a little scratchy this morning. I shouldn't be surprised. He is the creator of the world. And but in my mind, I too often put him in a box that I think I can fully understand. You know, it's okay to question and seek answers about what he's doing in our life, but realize that sometimes we're not going to fully understand it until later. In the meantime, during the challenge of your job search, look for what he's teaching you and how he's hoping to draw you into a closer relationship with him and how he's building your character and resilience. He does promise that for those that trust him, he'll never leave us and never forsake us, that he'll walk with us through all the challenges of life. He doesn't promise that he'll take away all the challenges of life, but he promises he'll always walk alongside us in that. He shows his love in a great number of ways if we look for it. And in the long run, we're likely to see that his plan was far more substantive than our own. Let me open us in a word of prayer, and then we'll dive into the rest of the morning. Lord, I'm grateful for these chances to come together, even if it's virtually and we're not seeing each other, but we pray that you use this time this morning for your purposes, that people get a greater understanding of you, but also gain the tactical and practical things that they need for their job search to be successful in the process, and gain new hope to see that this is something that they're going to come through successfully, and that you are walking alongside them through all of it. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. With that, let me pull this up here. I've got a short video by Scott Hamilton. If you know who he is, he's an Olympic gold medalist. As we're coming up to the Olympics in a couple of months, I thought it was appropriate. But Scott Hamilton, as you might know, has gone through significant other challenges in his life. And he talks about how he chose to view those and how it impacted what he does. So let me share my screen here, and we'll get into that.
I don't think anyone's truly equipped.
Sorry, it seems like we have technical difficulties. Let me try this one more time. Sorry about that. A number of you have said you haven't been seeing the audio or hearing the audio. Melanie did join us. I'm glad for that. And we'll both cut off our cameras here in a moment, and I'll get the video going again here. Hopefully you were hearing the audio earlier. Let me back this up and try this one more time. Sorry about that. Oh, here was the problem. Okay, Melanie and I can both cut out of our video here.
Yeah, I'm having some technical problems too. Can you hear me?
I heard you, Melanie. If you can cut off your mic and video for now till we get through this video, and then I'll come back on.
I don't think anyone's truly equipped to go out in front of 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people on an Olympic stage, and you're scared out of your mind. On a 200 by 100 surface of ice, you wonder why you do this because you're so nervous. On 2 10-inch lengths of 1/4-inch wide steel, through this, just get me through this. And you're to manipulate those edges for 4.5 minutes and do triple jumps and athleticism and not make a mistake. It's impossible. but I found a way to be just good enough to win the gold medal. The more I look back on it, I think it's unbelievably awesome. Like, that was me. You know, I always thought if I could be really good on the ice, you know, I could become famous. I think I'm probably more known for my health problems now than I am for anything I ever did on skates. When I was very little, I suffered from a disease that stopped me from growing. It was in and out of hospitals for years, and I was never really home. And so what ended up happening was I came back from kind of being in and out of hospitals, and I ended up going to the skating club thing just by accident. And I found skating, which kind of took on a life of its own, and it progressed. And pretty soon I'm competing. Pretty soon I'm living away from home. All my role models and the people that were teaching me how to live day to day were older skaters. So there was a lot of it that was terrific, but a lot of it that really wasn't guiding me in any real direction. It wasn't until I suffered the devastation of my mother losing her battle to cancer that something was awakened in me. I knew I needed something more, something better. I think I needed to have some strength, and my mother was my source of strength. When she was living, I would disappoint her, but when she was gone, I just didn't ever want to be less than she thought I could be. I was happy to just work. I was happy to just entertain. I'd do well, and I think that was good enough. Skating had given me life as a child, and it gave me, you know, kind of a strength as an adult. But what was about to happen really changed my life forever. You know, cancer, it put me into a phase of my life where I just needed to kind of sort it all out. I just survived something. Why? I survived something that took the most important person in my life off the planet. That was my mother. She died of cancer, and I survived. What's my purpose now? What do I need to do? How do I? And a big part of that dust settling was getting with Tracy. And she brought me to the church. She took me to a minister, a man named Ken Durham. And the first thing he said to me, which was extraordinary, was he goes, you have to understand that Christianity is a faith of history. These things actually happened. And I go, okay, that's a good starting off point. And just study what has happened and see how that resonates in your own life. And it grew. It just sort of, it's like, okay, I get it. When you survive testicular cancer and you want to start a family, you don't know what the issues are going to be. And I prayed that I would someday become a father. Tracy and I, we got engaged and married. And then my son was born 9 months and 2 days after we got married. So I guess there was a plan there. I thought I paid my health dues when I had cancer, but this was a whole other issue. I have a brain tumor. How do I tell my wife? And we have a 14-month-old son. How do I tell my wife that I have a brain tumor? I'd just gotten the news an hour before. I met them at the hotel, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, I have a brain tumor. And she took my hands, and without hesitation, she just started to pray. And it was in that moment I knew where I was going to put everything. My trust, my faith, everything. So the most powerful moment of my life. From that moment forward, we just said, whatever it is, whatever it takes, we'll face this. When they're gonna do a biopsy, they tell you, we're gonna drill a hole in your head, and then we're gonna take a needle down through your brain and take a piece of the tumor. They said, we seem to have found a safe corridor to do this. And I go, well, I'm not using most of it. But they tell you all the things that can go wrong in that surgery. And I remember waking up, and I looked at the clock, and it was 10:20. I knew where I was. And then the next thing I saw was my wife come in with a smile on her face. She said, they know what it is. And they found out that that brain tumor was one that I was born with, one that I'd had since birth, which inhibited my growth as a young child. That was the mysterious illness I had that they never diagnosed that got me into skating. Who would I be without a brain tumor? I'm 5'4". If I were 5'8", if I would have grown those years, 5'10", where would I be? Who would I be? I could choose to look at it as debilitating, to choose to focus on the suffering. I choose to look at that brain tumor as the greatest gift I could have gotten, because it made everything else possible. I didn't see past it this time. I didn't think I would survive. One point I was starting to really feel weak. And one nurse in particular, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I just was uncomfortable. And she was, can I get you anything? And I just said, no. I go, I'm just a little scared. And she said, do you pray? I said, yes. And she said, what do you say when you pray? I go, well, I just thank God for all the blessings in my life. Do you ask him for anything? No. I just want him to know I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Well, who is God to you? And I said, well, I guess he's my father. Oh, you're a father, right? Yes. If one of your children were hurting, wouldn't you want him to come to you for comfort, strength? Yes. So I changed the way I pray now. I ask. Uninhibitedly, I ask. I ask to heal. I ask for strength. I ask for courage. I ask for another child. I want to talk about miracles. After surviving the pituitary brain tumor, it's impossible, practically impossible. I did 6 injections a week for 2 years. No luck. We're not meant to have another child. We gave that to God. A month later, we found out that Max was on his way. Miracle Max. When I look back and I see all those little moments in my life where I needed a great deal of strength, I understand that through a strong relationship with Jesus, you can endure anything. I've just learned that the only true disability in life is a bad attitude. God is there to guide you through the tough spots. God was there every single time. Every single time. My name is Scott Hamilton, and I am second.
I've seen that video a few times, and I'm always encouraged by it because it reminds me that life doesn't always go as you plan, but if you look for what you can redeem out of it, what you can focus on, and how by the way things play out, it actually can impact your life for good. And I love the statement he makes that the only real disability in life is a bad attitude, and that certainly has been true. With that, we're going to move on here. I am so glad we have Melanie on board. You're going to be much better handled by her presentation than by mine. And so I'm really glad to have her here. It occurred to me this morning, and she may not appreciate me saying this, but we have known each other. We met over 30 years ago. 30 years. It's amazing considering we're both just 35,
True. True.
But at the time, I came on board at Robert Half International in March of '95, and Melanie was already there. And to give you some perspective here of what experience Melanie brings, Melanie was the #1 recruiter for Robert Half International worldwide, and did that multiple years. And she knows what she's talking about. She's interviewed, it's got to be thousands of people over the years at this point. I have no idea how many it would be for me either, but it's been also a lot. But she has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so she has seen what works and what's effective, and we'll share that with you here this morning. Melanie, I'll turn it over to you, and you've got the next hour. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Harry. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, so I had some technical difficulties this morning too, but I think we're on our way. I guess to start out, as by way of introduction, is that, when I started my career, which was in accounting, and I'm a CPA, I found that, I had little joy in doing it. And I had a rough 3 years. Funny enough, my mom had told me, you have to keep your job for 3 years when I started out of college, at least. And I kept that almost within a month or so of that, not because I had planned on it. It was just how it worked out. And I left Arthur Andersen, where I was, which was just a great, fantastic, phenomenal group of people, to venture out into something unknown that was extremely scary for me. I was very afraid to go to Robert Half, to take a 25% cut in pay at a time when you're 25 years old. And that's pretty substantial. And I just leap. And so I say that because job changes don't always happen as they planned, and careers can change directions. And I've experienced that. And honestly, God blessed me at Robert Half. It was nothing I had. I hadn't gone to school for it. He just saw fit that I could do okay in that industry, so that today I could talk to you and encourage you in a similar manner, to take hold and grasp, that which is out of your reach and may feel uncomfortable for something in the short term or duration might be hard and difficult, but that in the end or over time will be joyous for you. And I encourage you, not necessarily to change careers, but I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to be afraid. And I think, the word for the day would be courage. I'd like to go through this presentation, and what I encourage you to do is just get one or two things out of it. You don't have to get the whole thing out of it, and just get one or two things. And I think out of that, you'll find that there's room and opportunity to do well in something. So we're going to start out here, how to wow interviewers. Can you see my screen? Okay, I'm going to assume you can.
Yep.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. what I always like to say when I start this presentation is, like I said, two takeaways. Try to find two because you can't do it all. Nobody can. There's a law of absorption in our minds, and we can only take on a few things at a time. So seek to find those two things that maybe resonate with your heart, as we go through this. And just do those two things for now, or one. If there's only one, that's fine. Just and if you are someone who can take on three because they're minor steps for you, then great. But I encourage you to find a couple of things that you can incorporate into your interview process. And so, my story is not too different from many. Condoleezza Rice was in a similar situation. She went to college at, I think, the age of 16 or 17. She was very young, and she started in one career direction. And then she got to college. She was shocked to find that she didn't love it. So she pivoted and went a new direction. And, sometimes just even interviewing slightly differently, like pivoting slightly as you're interviewing, going a slightly different direction can make all the difference. So again, I want to encourage you today to have courage and to dare to try something a little new, even though it might be slightly or very uncomfortable. We've all been there. We'll be there again. And so here goes. When you're interviewing, it's really your time not to be shy, right? I mean, you've made it through that ATS gauntlet, or you've networked your way in to an interview, and now it's your time to shine. And so what we really want to talk about is facts. It's not bragging if it's true, unless you're, and if there's a sense of humility. There's a gal that Robert Half used to work with. She used to call it confidence flavored with humility. And I love that. I think that's indicative of who we all want to be. And so it's not bragging if it's fact, right? So interviewing is really a consultative sales call. What you're trying to do is uncover kind of what their needs are. And you do that by asking good questions. And then you want to take your experience and match it to those needs. And we're going to use something called the STAR stories that I think incorporates a lot of what will be helpful for you. And then you want to close the sale. So whether you know it or not, you are a salesperson. And it's just like if you were to sell your house. I like to use that as an example. I mean, you wouldn't have dirty dishes in the sink. It would be cleaned and picked up because you're trying to put your house's best foot forward. And likewise, when you're interviewing, it's the same thing. You're trying to put your best foot forward. So dress the part, right? Look the best you can. Be sharp, right? And be prepared. And in the end, over time, you'll find the right opportunity. Really, what we want to do is show that you can add value to the organization, and fairly quickly, because that's important too. Because most companies are in existence for profit, and so we want to talk about how our value is going to increase their value. So how are you going to be evaluated? This is really quite simple. And I think if you know this, it kind of, it brings a little, it kind of brings the vastness of interviewing like down a little bit to something that's more concrete and that you can kind of get your arms around. So you're going to be evaluated on three things. One, and 50%, let me say it one more time, 50% is chemistry. Are you a culture fit? And I know that to be true. Robert Half had a statistic that 80% of the time people hire people like themselves. Now, in today's world, that's probably slightly lower because we have we've gone through a series of a decade or so of talking about diversity and inclusion. I mean, longer than a decade, but really the last decade, there's been a lot of emphasis on that. So that number has probably come down. But funny enough, whenever I was placing someone in a job, I always required and mandated that I meet the hiring manager because I knew that most of the time they're going to hire someone like themselves. And so I knew to have a successful placement, I needed to know who they were and what they were like. And that was part of the reason the job was, I was successful. I mean, Robert Half taught me that, and it was true. And so 50% is chemistry, 30% is competence. Can you do the job, right? And that's your resume, right? That's your background, that's your experience, your knowledge, your skills, and that's what you're bringing to the table. And that's critical. However, in a job, there is opportunity for you to learn. So, I mean, you don't have to know everything about an open position. You have to know a good percentage of it. And then if you don't know something, then you have to have enthusiasm, which is the third point, and willingness to do the job. Passion, energy, and joy is contagious, and it's hard to manufacture. So if you're doing work that you don't love, or you're going after jobs that are just kind of interest, be cognizant of the fact that that is a part of the evaluation that they're doing in terms of hiring you. They are looking at your enthusiasm or your willingness and interest in the job. Okay. So I got to take a little drink here, just a second. So there's 3 key questions, and I'm just repeating these we're going to come up from a slightly different angle. Can you do the job? That's your strengths, your abilities. That's your resume. Will you love the job? That's your personality, your drive, who you are. And can we tolerate working with you? That's the fit. So it's not too different from a relationship, right? With people and friends that you have, a significant other, a spouse, whatever that might be. These are things. I mean, are you a good match? Like, do you have similar interests? And do you like being around each other? So, a lot of our waking life is spent, at least 8 hours of it generally, is spent with these other people you're going to be working with. So getting along well and is important, as are the other aspects. Okay. So now I want to go through, if I could emphasize anything, I think this is a really interesting screen. So if you're screen saving, and you can see this online too, but the question behind the questions is kind of fun. So, a lot of people ask, how do I answer questions? And while that's relevant and important, and I can address that, I think it's also helpful to understand why are they asking and what are they trying to get at? Because that can help drive your answer. So, so the first one is, tell me about your career transitions. And a lot of times people think that's mostly about your abilities, but honestly, what they're really trying to figure out is your motivation or drive. Will you love the job? Why did you make those transitions, right? Was it because you didn't like the job? Was it because you didn't like the company? What was your motivation? Okay, so it's a slightly different take than what you probably thought. And then tell me what you did at, ABC company. Now, this is really, they're getting at, can you do the job? That's strengths. That's probably a little more obvious. And then tell me about your favorite boss is really getting at, fit. Like, who do you work well with? What kind of environment do you work well in? Why should we hire you? Now that could get at 2 factors, but primarily it's looking at strengths. Can you do the job? But that could get to motivation as well. But really what they're looking at when they ask that question, a lot of people will automatically revert to their interest in the role. But truthfully, what they're looking for is, what do you bring to the table? So when they ask you why they should hire you, or a similar question, they're really looking at your strengths to come in and add value to the organization, perform the job at a high level, and be successful. Okay? What is your greatest weakness? The interesting thing is that a lot of people automatically think they're asking about your motivations, all right? But truthfully, what they're looking at is skill level, and that makes that question easier to answer. For example, if the job required high Excel skills, you're not going to want to say that you have weak Excel skills, but instead you might, and if you do, you're probably not a fit. But in this case, if Excel skills, let's say you're above average, but you're not a superstar, maybe you should take a class before you interview and tell them, I have above average Excel skills and I'm working on getting excellent skills. I've recently taken 3 courses online, and here's what I learned, and go on from there. So that's just a very simple, easy example at when they're asking about your greatest weakness, address something that maybe is not on your resume. You could say, say, well, I haven't worked in this particular industry, but here's what I know about the industry. Here's what I've done, to compensate for that. And I believe that I will, I've been in a variety of industries, so I believe I'll pick up on this one quickly, and so again, you don't want to highlight something that's going to be an inherent deterrent to being able to perform the job. But when they talk about weakness, address the question with something that maybe is not on your resume, that wouldn't be a fit, and then what you're doing to compensate for that. Okay? All right, I'm going to move on. So just the most common interview mistakes are not researching the company. And I'll talk to you about how to do that. It's actually very simple and does not take too much time. Not being prepared, not having questions ready. So that's another important thing. And meaty questions, ones that are really relevant to the role, that'll get to and address some of the things that you really want to know and need to know to make a valid decision about a position. Being late. Talking or looking at your phone. I would suggest leaving your phone in your car. Slamming past employers. There's no reason to do that. And we'll talk about the pivot. So the pivot is when someone asks you, tell me about your last role, why you left or why you're leaving. What you really want to talk about instead of why you're leaving is what you're going for. So for example, if you're with a small company, you could say, well, I really enjoy the people that I work with. And what I'm hoping to find is a larger organization with career opportunities that are a little broader. I feel like I have, mastered a lot of my current positions, responsibilities, and I'm looking for an opportunity to take those, bring them to an organization and expand on it. So I haven't slammed my employer. I really haven't talked about why I'm leaving per se. I'm talking about the pivot, what I'm going to. So using we before I, that's a mistake. Because when I'm interviewing people, I will tell you one of the things that drives me just batty sometimes is I'll ask someone, tell me about your role in this position or in a project, like if they worked on a project. And people tend to talk about, well, we did this and we did that. And they'll say, well, what was your role? And a lot of times people have a very difficult time expressing what their particular role was in a project or on a team, or even organizationally, if you're a CEO or a COO, strategically, again, you want to talk about personally what your role was and what your contribution was within that position, within the organization, and just really as a whole, okay? It doesn't mean you don't talk about what the team did, but very quickly, you want to get to your role. And talking about dollars, at most we want to give ranges, and we'll talk about that as well. All right, so one of the things I mentioned is researching and preparing questions. Now, this is kind of a little easy way to come up with some what I call meaty questions. So if you spend about 45 minutes, that's an average. Sometimes it's only 30, sometimes it's an hour. It depends on the level and the complexity of the role. But on average, if you spend about 10 minutes doing a Google search for press releases, and as you read those press releases, try to come up with one or two questions you can ask the interviewer. It'll also help you absorb more as you're reading, because a lot of times if we read just for the sake of reading, it's never the same as if we read with the sake of coming up with questions. Just like teaching something, you absorb more and learn more about it, coming up with questions. So that's one way. And then you're also demonstrating that you've done research. Review their website, spend 15 minutes on it, come up with 2 or 3 questions from their website. Again, you're demonstrating you're doing research. You're also coming up with meaty questions, things that you really would like to know. And then reread the job posting and come up with 2 questions from that. There's no way you know everything about it, or I'm sure if you reread that posting, there's 1 or 2 things you're like, okay, I've done this. I wonder if that's what they're asking. How can I dive into this a little more? So if coming up with questions presents difficulty for you sometimes, here's an easy way to kind of come up with a few good questions. Look up your interviewer on LinkedIn. I think that goes without saying in today's world. And understand their who. Their who is number W, what they do. H, how they make money. And then O is our customers. And understanding their who is also very important, because sometimes it's confusing. I mean, some organizations have multiple businesses they're in, right? Like a United Healthcare, right? I mean, they're in a myriad of businesses. And if you're interviewing at a company that you have a contact in, ask that individual, how do you make money? Like, what are the average margins in your organization? What are the roadblocks? So if you know someone in the company, you can do that. If not, then you'll find some of those answers as you're looking at their website. And you can actually type in, to AI and Google, how does United Healthcare make money, right? I mean, and it'll spit out for you some of that information. Who are United Healthcare's customers, right? Or Medtronic, or whomever you're looking for. So there's a lot of data out there. You don't have to spend a lot of time. Again, spend about 45 minutes on average, and I think you'll get to most of what you need. And then know your why. And your why is why you're interested in this job, why you want to work for this organization, and why you want to work in a particular position. The reason is because if you know why you want to work at a company, your passion and energy, your questions will be more meaty, they'll be more direct and specific, and more engaging for both you and the interviewer. So understand, why am I looking at this job? Okay. And you'll be able to communicate that and articulate that much easier if you just kind of write it down. Okay. So, we're going to move into star interviewing. This is probably the hardest part of the presentation, because I'm going to actually have you do some work here. So get a piece of paper, or sometimes pen to paper is easier, I think. If not, get your computer ready, and we're going to talk about star interviewing. So truthfully, the best predictor of future performance is past performance, right, in similar situations. So, and that's obvious. I mean, if when you learned how to tie your shoes, right, you never had a problem tying your shoes in the future. When you learned how to run, okay, you maybe you started walking and then jogging, and pretty soon you're running marathons, and now how to run a marathon successfully because you've practiced it. Right? You've been there. And so here we do want to talk about, what have you done in the past that now is rote for you, or that you are good at, that you can now bring to this organization and contribute. Okay. So, just a second. Sorry about that. All right. So the STAR stands for situation or task. That's the ST. The actions you took on that task or situation, and the results. Okay, so everyone has quantifiable results and accomplishments, whether or not you think you do. Now, here's another slide that I would encourage you to look at and have as you're writing your stars. All right. So we're actually the next slide. Sorry. So shift your thinking from what you do to what happens when you do it. So for instance, when I do this interview session, what people have told me is that they get some enthusiasm around interviewing. Because face it, nobody's a professional interviewer. I get nervous when I do interviews. So most of us are not really great interviewers, and that's fine. And the people interviewing you, the hiring manager, they don't really want to interview either. I mean, they do to the extent they want to find the right person, but it's not their core job. They're not in HR generally. I mean, sometimes if you're interviewing HR jobs, of course, but generally, their day-to-day work is not interviewing, it's something else. And so, what I do is, people tell me they get some energy, they get some encouragement. And so that's what I want. The results is there's a return on the investment of me, sharing my information. And that is a slight pivot, some good ideas. And so what you're looking at is, what's the return on the investment if a company hires you? And here's what you're trying to tell them. I know what you need. I can do it. I can prove I can do it. And I can do it again. Okay? So that's the return on the investment for you. And really, when you think about this, and I don't have this on the slide, what we're trying to do is minimize the risk of hiring you. So throughout your interview process, which and as you craft your stars, your events that you're going to communicate, and as you walk into an organization and craft your questions, you want to try to minimize the risk of hiring you, right? And the way you do that is to show the return on the investment, that you know what they need, you can do it, you can prove it, and you'll do it again. It doesn't mean you can do it all. It's okay not to know 100% of a job. That would be kind of boring. Then you just stay where you are, right? But again, for the most part. All right. So here's the slide I was mentioning. Here's the return on the investment if someone hires you, right? And likewise, you are looking for a return on your time investment, right? Because you're investing the majority of your waking life in a company. And that's why creating good questions is important. This is a two-sided event. Everybody wants to feel like are getting something out of this, personally, financially, right? So when you think about the return on the investment that a company will get in hiring you, how have you helped your employer make more money, save time, make work easier, solve a specific problem or problems, become more competitive? I like that one. Strengthen the relationships or image with customers, vendors, or the public. Maybe you've expanded the normal scope of business incrementally or significantly. Maybe you've brought in new customers. Maybe you've retained existing customers in a volatile company or industry of some sort. So many times it's very difficult to craft what your quantifiable results are. And these are some things that can trigger ideas in your mind. Okay. So I'm going to have you write a star story in a minute, and let me show you how they're done. And I don't expect you to do this completely. I just want you, we're just going to just do a few notes. So here is the situation. I'm going to let you read that. I'm not going to read through this for you. Here was the action this person took. Here were their results. And here's the tie-in or the theme. When you write a star out, you see there, it's okay, I said ST. So what I want you to do now is on your paper and your computer, I want you to write 3 columns. We're going to start there. 3 columns. First one is S or T, situation, task. The second column is action, is A. And the third column is R, results. Now here's the beauty of a star. Many people think I got to start at ST. You do not. You can start at action. You can start at result. But you should have 5 to 10. I mean, some people say 10. I think for, the higher level your position is, the more of these you need, right? If you're at executive level. But I'm going to have you write out ST in column 1, A and R. And then just jot down in one of the columns either a situation or task that you were presented with. Or if you have a hard time drafting that, write down an action that you took at one point in your career, right? That was related to some of those things you saw earlier, or write down results that you've been able to accomplish. I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes. So based on time, I'm going to keep going. Okay. So because we just don't have a ton of time left and I want to answer questions. So really what we're talking about is your story. And here's another great slide that you can look at. So when you're writing those stars up, you can talk about a time when you worked effectively under pressure. Again, you can just work, you can use these, there, you can say, I worked effectively under pressure given this scenario. Or when you handled a difficult situation with a coworker or customer. I mean, maybe that's a situation that you were in. Maybe you were creative in solving a problem. Maybe that's the result that you had. Maybe you persuaded team members to do things your way. Maybe that was a result you had. Maybe that's an action you took. You had to persuade others, and the result was that you consolidated activities by 20% on your team. There's a lot of, maybe you not navigated or overcame personality clashes. Okay, so here's some things that you can use to just spur on some ideas on how those stars. So these can help populate your stars. Okay, so there's a lot of things just here, or your own things that you've done. But educated yourself to master a skill. Maybe you overcame a major obstacle. But these are some of those things that can populate those columns in your stars. Okay. Okay. So stars aside, all right. We could spend a lot of time on those, but just from an overview, I think it's important to be prepared with, as I said, 5 to 10 of those written out. And you saw the example I gave. I would definitely spend time on that. That's a major component of interviewing, is having those ready. Because I will tell you this, every star you write out answers, 3 to 5 questions. So just write out what you've accomplished, write out some situations you've been faced, write out what those results are. Because each of those, like that example that I had previously, I could ask him, tell me when you overcame a weakness. So he could talk about, or she could talk about, how she expanded the market, or tell me about the most difficult project you've undertaken. That same star result I showed you earlier would answer that question. So these will answer a lot of questions, not just one. And that's why you do them, because you're prepared. You've got, arrows in your quiver, right? You've got tools in your tool chest. You've got examples that you can demonstrate that you've done it before, you can do it again, all right? And that's what we want to do. Now, when starting the interview process, so we're going to take a break. When starting the interview process, one of the main questions, or just to get to know each other, is tell me about yourself. And I want you to do this slightly differently. I want you to pretend that they asked you, why are you a fit for this job? And here's how I want you to answer that. Instead of going through your chronological experience or diving into that immediately, I want you to come up with 3 to 5 reasons you're a great candidate. So, for example, you might say, I have 5 years. So it says, tell me about yourself. Instead of diving into your resume, say, well, I have 5 years in the construction industry in both hands-on and leadership roles. I've worked in a general contractor as well as a large subcontractor, which helps me relate to and understand some of the difficulties either side might encounter. The size of the projects I've worked on range from $2 million to $30 million, which aligns well with the projects I would work on here. I desire to shepherd people under my leadership to help them reach their potential. I've done that in the past, and I will do that here as well. Then you ask a question. What would you like me to cover first? Okay. All right. So that kind of sets the interview. And so before I move on, again, just to go back to this, what you are doing and initially is you are setting up who you want them to think about you as. Like, who are you? Who are you? And when you get that first question, you get to tell them, this is who I am. Okay. And so in this answer, you are crafting the umbrella of you as an employee and you as an individual. And so this makes a really big difference. A lot of people don't do this and skip it. It makes a difference. You get to tell them who you are instead of them assuming something. And the most critical things about who you are. Okay. So the financial discussion, I want to cover this very briefly because it does come up a lot. And, when I think about this, really, we're looking at a total rewards package. we're looking at salary, benefits, growth opportunities, and flexibility. And the reason I bring these up to you is because when you get asked, about financial rewards, salary that you're seeking, or that discussion comes up, I want you to be thinking about it a little more holistically. Unfortunately, our brains usually automatically go to salary. And so to give you some arm you with something that's a little more holistic and broader and strategic. Now, in salary discussions, just a couple of things. Avoid being the first to disclose a specific dollar amount. Talk in ranges, okay? And you can do that research on LinkedIn, salary.com, Glassdoor, Indeed has a salary calculator. It's listed. So you're thinking in ranges, but you're thinking holistically. Because you might be willing to take a little less salary if you can work from home 50% of the time or all the time. Or if this role has an opportunity for an advancement within a year or 18 months, and really that's the carrot you're going after, your salary expectations might be modified. Your benefits. There's a lot of things that you want to know holistically before you give a number. Don't wait until the final step to talk about compensation. Get it on the table. We're all adults, right? We know what we need in order to live. So make sure that it's discussed in the process. You do not want to get to the altar, we call it, right? You don't want to get to the altar and find out you're $30,000, $40,000 apart, and it's just not going to work. So, all right. So, and then lastly, don't focus on base pay alone. You want to know what's important to you. Okay, 3 final tips. Circular interviewing. These are just ideas. So if you're a pretty good interviewer, and a lot of what I've covered is something that you've been practicing, a thing you could add on is, on occasion, after you answer a question that they offer you, ask what's called a circular question. Like, I'm happy to go into more detail. Is there something you'd like me to elaborate on? And the reason having these questions in your arsenal is important is because a lot of us end up on the rabbit trail. We're talking and talking and talking, and we can't stop, and we're not sure what to do. So to get you out of the rabbit trail, you could say something, and I don't exactly know why this works, but it does. You can say, let me stop myself. What else can I cover for you? And that's a circular interview. That's asking a question. Or you could say, let me stop myself. Is there something you'd like me to elaborate on? So it gets you out of, if you only have about 90 seconds to answer a question. 90 seconds, that's not much. So as you're crafting your stars, make sure they stay within those 90 seconds. And if you find yourself, kind of continuing to talk and having a hard time figuring out how to stop yourself, just do it. Then the final question I'd like you to have, and I'd like, and this should be written down, all your stars should be written down, your questions should be written down. Ask them this: is there anything that would preclude you from moving me forward? I'd like to address any concerns if possible. The reason you ask that is because in the interview, the interviewer themselves might have forgotten to ask you something, or there might be something they like to talk about elaborate on, but you might just have run out of time, or maybe you just had a great discussion and something that, and this gives them, something didn't click with them in terms of a question they wanted to ask. And you ask this question and you pause. You give them a moment to gather themselves together. And I use this question. I've used this on interviews. I'm happy to share that story if we have time. It's kind of funny. I did ask this question of a COO, and he went, "No, you've answered all my questions." And I think he was kind of trying to catch me a little bit. It was funny, and I laughed. I just laughed out loud because he put his head down and said no. And it wasn't a competition, but it was just a funny response from someone. So I practice this. I practice what I preach. All right. Follow up. And this will be surprising to you. Send a thank you email or note within 24 hours. 97 to 98% do not. As a recruiter, I'm a headhunter. I bet you 1 in 100, maybe 2 in 100 send me a thank you email, if you can believe it. And recruiters are important. They're the gatekeepers. So, but make sure you do that very quickly. That really will differentiate. I had a client who said he wouldn't hire anyone for his sales team who didn't follow up with a robust email, adding in there how they were going to contribute to the organization, what they were going to do when they started in the role, and what kind of excitement they have about being there. Because he's like, if they can't do that in an interview, they can't do it with my customers. And so, people really think if you can't send a follow-up email and communicate well after an interview, which that's your best opportunity. What are you going to do when you get inside, when you're not on your best behavior, right? Or it's kind of more mundane. So do it. If you don't hear back by an agreed upon date, and it's fine to set that, call or email them, reminding of your interest. And we just kind of suggest be persistent, follow up once a week, maybe for 7 weeks, then let it go. There's a lot of reasons you don't get the job. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's because someone internal came forward. Sometimes there's changes in the hiring process or plan. So don't be offended by that, even though I know it's painful. It can be very painful and discouraging. But believe me, a lot of times if you've made it into the interview, it's because they like what you've presented. So you can have some confidence, be undergirded by that. Make notes on what you did well. So right when you hang up, make notes. What did I do well? What would I like to cover differently? And then you can relay that in an email, or if there's a follow-up interview, you can communicate it at that time. So that's fresh in your mind when you walk away from an interview. I'm like, I should have said this, or I forgot to say that. Write it down. Just write it down so you've got your notes. Keep networking and filling your pipeline. So parting thoughts. Managers and hiring people they want a mindset like a CEO. So for someone who is invested in the success of an organization as a whole and themselves both, to be a part and component of the success of that organization. Make sure you research the company, right? Prepare good questions and practice. So, this is going back to the 3 things that they're looking for. Can you do the job? Are you passionate about the job? And do we want to work with you? So it's a two-way street. The choice to hire is the employer's and the choice to accept is yours. But you might, I always say, set yourself up for an offer, because you can always say no if something goes awry, but set yourself up for an offer because then you have more choices of roles out there. Okay, questions. I think I'm right at the end of the hour. But if there's some questions, please let me know.
You went very quickly. We actually have plenty of time. And so please do enter any questions or comments for Melanie into the chat box, and we can address those. Melanie, you touched on so many great things. And, one of the things you just said at the end here, I think is so critically important. I've talked to people that go to a first interview and they think, I don't think I'm really that interested in this job. Go through the process. First of all, it's good practice. You can always say no. You're not obligated to take the job, but you've probably seen this as I have, that occasionally, they get through the interview process and the employer says, we realize this might not be the best fit for you, but we have this other situation over here that, we'd like to talk to you about. And that turns out to be a wonderful job, but you would have never found out about it if you didn't keep going through the process. So don't exclude things too quickly. Go through, you can always say no. We have a question here. If you answered a question incorrectly in an interview, could be a technical question. Should you address that in your thank you note?
Wow, I've never been asked that question. Let me think about that.
That's a
good question. I think there's a sense of humility when someone states that. And I think the humility of that peppered with some humor. So, we all make mistakes, and I make more mistakes, I think, in a day than not. The older I get, the more I see my, things that, so I think, when you approach something like that, I'm thinking of an example of a woman I used to work with, and she had such a great sense of humor. So when she made a mistake, she had a smile on her face. She was, and she'd say, Melanie, I think I did that wrong. And she was a high level person. She was a vice president. But she had such humility and humor in that. Like she just admitted it. So I think it would be okay to say in an email, but I think when you write the email, I will tell you, I think it's fine to address it. Send the email to yourself first and then read the email a couple hours later. Okay. So craft the email you're going to send it to yourself, then reread it and read it. I'm telling you, you'll change it. Because what's happening is when you first write down what happened or that you got wrong, your brain is it's in probably a high stress or more anxiety state. And what you want to do is get it out of your brain, get it on, get it down, send it to yourself, walk away, and then come back. And then I would say do that 3 times, okay? And the third time you'll probably see the humor in it a little bit, and it won't be as serious because your brain is calmed down, you're looking at it rationally, you're not quite in a panic. And then forward it to someone else if you have anyone else. I do that quite a bit. Actually have a friend I run things by, and she's like, "Oh, that sounds a little, tough." And I would tell you, when I write emails first, when I'm a little bit anxious, I craft them very differently the following day than I did that day because I get it out of my brain. I get it out of my brain. I panic, and then my rational side can kick in, and then some humor with it, just a little bit. It doesn't not ha ha humor, but just humility and like whoops. So that's how I would say if you're going to do that, especially if it's a technical matter, or if it's a statistic or something like that. And then and you might say, I know I when I said this, I was thinking this way, and I guess the actual answer is this. So again, how you craft that. And I'm not opposed to you going on AI, and or Googling, how do I send how do I correct a mistake in an interview, right? How do I correct a mistake in an interview and see what it says out there just to give you some words. So that would be my thoughts on that. Carrie, do you have anything else?
I agree. I think, admitting up to that, but, in a way that shows that you're willing to learn and as you say, a little depreciating humor or just humility with that is a good thing. You hit it. Have another one here. What's the best way to answer why you left a company when it might have been a toxic environment and the values didn't align with theirs?
So again, I what I like to do is, if I could stat, it's a pivot. So why you left a company is why you're going away, but what you're going toward, okay? So talk about what you're going toward. So you could say something like, in my last role, the position I had was very robust. And I'm looking for a similar type of position in an environment that has opportunities for employees, that has a culture of let's see. I'm trying to think of a good word. That has an impassioned culture where people on a daily basis enjoy what they do, who they work with, and are well aligned with the corporate mission. Okay. I've said nothing about my former company other than that I had a robust position that I enjoyed and thrived in. I did not talk about the toxic environment. I talked about what I'm going to. And it's not instead of, it's not but. It's a hard stop. Don't keep rattling on. So write that out. You can just use what I said. If it works, then modify it slightly. I think this video is recorded, so you can find it online. Just, if that fits you, then just modify it slightly for what you want to say. But, and you don't have to go on. You can just stop. But that's how I would address it. Again, it's the pivot. Like, what if you had a boss that was, abusive, like verbally. And I've run into this at companies where, I had a person I hired and she called me and said, my boss is abusive. And I was like, okay. I said, what's the situation? I was, and we talked through it and she went and talked to her boss because I think her boss was very reasonable, didn't understand what they were doing or how they were coming across. And their boss actually adjusted. So the point is that, we're just communicating. People have a lot of things they're not good at. But I think, again, just trying to pivot toward what you're looking for, not what you're running or going away from.
Exactly. Another question here. Should I address being overqualified up front during the tell me about yourself question? One of the challenges I'm facing in my most recent role, it was a director level role that I held for a year. But when I apply for senior manager and manager roles, I've been told I'm overqualified. When I apply to individual contributor manager or senior manager level roles, any advice?
So first of all, in a lot of careers, accounting, CFOs, controllers, etc., there is a trend where companies historically used to want to hire an up and comer, and they're kind of tired of it. So they're looking for someone who can come in and hit the ground running, train existing people, right, who don't need a lot of hand holding. So in accounting, for example, I know that small to mid-sized companies have pivoted and are looking for more experienced people. Also, because I'm just going to make some comment about stats out there, and maybe this hasn't been your experience, but statistically, because of the flexible workforce and work from home, there's just kind of a disconnect. And so it does, people who are up and coming or maybe have less experience it takes a little bit longer for them to add value than when they were face to face. It's just the facts. So it doesn't mean they're not adding value. And I'm not saying it's bad to be, it's just we're in a little different medium. Like there's been a shift. And so I think, talking about that, talking about and researching some of those statistics so that you are armed with them. Say, I realize that organizations today are faced with a diverse, remote, or flexible workforce, and training those people up in a quick manner to be able to impact the organization as quickly. My experience has taught me, and talking about what your experience has taught you, how you can bridge that gap. So again, if you got the interview, right? I mean, if you got the interview, they're interested. So what you really have to be able to understand yourself is why you want a particular role. And I mean, there's nothing you can do if a company is going to be biased towards that. You can't necessarily convince them if they've already made a decision. But if you're doing an interview, they don't want to waste their time. People don't have excess time, so they are interested in you. And so I would say, talking about what you've accomplished, why you're interested in that particular role or that company. I mean, sometimes the angle is, I love your organization and I love your industry and I want to learn it. I believe it's where the future lies. And so, at this point in my life, what's most important to me is being able to add value to a company, to train others up to do the same, and to be a part of an industry that, is pivotal for our economy or our world and is shaping things today. And so, I mean, I think truthfully be honest with yourself as to why you're interested in the organization, and then kind of articulate that. So that would be my initial thoughts.
Yeah. For both of these last couple of questions here, I'm not a fan of people memorizing the answers for every question that comes up in an interview. But if you've got a challenging situation, I would work out the wording of how you want to express that and practice it so that it comes out naturally and memorize it. I think very often I'm sure you found, Melanie, when people get to a challenging question, they tend to ramble until they figure they got it all addressed, but that never goes well either. And so pick your wording. AI can help you work out some of that wording, put in some prompts to, get several examples, and it can help you find some wording that works for you. But then practice it and have that down so you can answer it concisely and directly and in a way that's going to work for you instead of just rambling.
Yep. I mean, the questions, if you dread a question, okay, that's a key indicator to write the answer out for that question. Okay. I'll give you an example. I had a woman who had a gap in her work environment. Oh, I'm sorry. And I just I mean, that wasn't too big of a deal in my opinion. I just was curious as to, I said, well, so it looks like you ended here in, 2021 and you didn't start here in 2022. What did you do during that time? And she started crying. And I was, and I felt really bad for her. I wasn't upset or, angry. And she, I could just hear it in her voice. She wasn't sobbing. I could hear a glitch in her voice. And she told me that her father had passed away. And, so, I mean, she wasn't, but I could just hear her, kind of, and then she said, I don't know how to answer that question. And I said, okay. So I go, what? So I have this thing, it's called write, write, write. So I said, all right. So when I ask you that question, I want you to honestly write down what your response is. Like, why are you asking me that question? Don't ask me that question. I hate that question. Whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm not answering that question. It's none of your business, blah, blah, blah. So write out what's in your head. Get it out of your head. It's like I was talking about earlier. Get it out of your head and then walk away. So these are the questions you dread. Whatever your response is, just get it out of your head. Then the next day or whatever, a couple hours later, come back, look at the question again, and then write out another answer. And I promise you that your second go around is going to be slightly different than your first, right? So write out, then pretend you get that question again, but get it out of your head. You got to get this stuff out of your head. That's what's so important. You got it because your mind wants to express something. Your mind and your wants to talk about this. It wants to express it. So let it and get it out and write it down. All right. So then you write the second. Then the third time you come back, and the third or fourth time, I promise you there'd be a little bit of humor. Not a lot. It's not ha-ha. It's just it's a lightness. It frees you. And so write out those questions that you dread, get them down on paper, take a couple takes, do a couple takes on them. And it's a Harvard study. The Harvard study says if you write out what's in your head, it'll relieve some of the tension of that. And so, scientifically it's proven. So I would say do that.
Absolutely. And, when people over explain a difficult situation they've had or problem in their background, usually by them rambling and over explaining, it raises more questions and more red flags rather than them having a concise, well thought out answer. And so I couldn't agree more with everything you just shared. One final question here that we have time for, but how do you feel more confident during an interview? How do you build confidence and not go in trembling?
So I think there's probably four things. So number one, kind of a fun thing, is to always wear blue. So there was a survey done of like 10,000 HR leaders, and they said the number one color that expressed confidence was blue. So I try to always wear blue when I'm meeting with clients or for the first time or doing these presentations. Okay. So that's just kind of a fun thing to know that actually expresses confidence that you may or may not have. Right. And so doing that is one thing. So that's just kind of a fun thing. That's easy, right? So you can do that. Secondly, if you've spent about 45 minutes researching that company, like I talked about, and coming up with questions. Medium blue, navy's okay, but any color, but navy's okay too. Yeah, and black's okay too, but navy or blue is the number one.
Black and blue this morning. I'm ready.
Black and blue. So number two, make sure that you've done that 45 minutes of research and come up with those 5 to 7 questions. All right. And that'll help you a lot. Breathe easier because I've looked them up online. I've done a little research. You don't have to know everything. Don't worry about knowing everything. So do your research. Okay. Next, spend about an hour crafting those stars. And you've got 3 columns. You can start in any column. You can start with results and work back and fill in the action and situation. You can start at action and work sideways. You can start at situation and work forward. So write out your 5 to 7 stars and use those things, those examples I gave. You can just use those exact words. You can say, I persuaded my teammates, to do A, B, and C, and then talk about what the result was and why did you have to do that? That's the situation. Okay. So those things. And then I think, so that's three. Wear blue, right? Have your questions ready and do your research, And then the next one was do your stars. And then the final thing is understanding what are they really asking. And it's simple. They're trying to figure out, can we work with you? Do you have the skills? And are you enthusiastic? And here's the thing. Here's the little trick, okay? 70%. 50% is chemistry, 20% is enthusiasm. 70% is based on something you have no control over, other than your enthusiasm. You can control your enthusiasm and interest, right? Right? And then only 30% is, can you do the job? So, when someone's hiring someone, they're looking at a lot of different they're looking at only three, minor factors. So that's how give yourself a break. Like, well, either we fit or we don't, right? I am who I am. I'm enthusiastic about the job. So I'm covered about 70% of the hiring, evaluation. And then bring in your skills. And how do you do that? That's what you have on your resume. That's your stars, right? Some of those things.
Melanie, terrific. Thanks so much. And a lot of great tidbits in there. I hope people were able to take away at least one or two things that they can apply going forward in their interviews. And, as we're getting to the end of the year here, obviously it gets more and more difficult to arrange an interview in the next couple of weeks, but gives them some time here to practice and be prepared as we jump into the new year. I just want to run through a number of things that are available to you through Crossroads to take advantage of as well. And then we'll wrap up this morning. But Melanie, thanks so much and appreciate your time this morning. Let me share my screen with the additional information. Sorry for the technical difficulties we had earlier this morning. I didn't handle that or prepare as well as I could have, but it all worked out well. Everything that we offer through Crossroads is on our website at mncrossroads.com with current schedules and times and events that are coming up, and certainly want you to check that out. You probably went there to get to the Zoom registration to be onto this webinar this morning, but peruse the rest of the website too. We have a lot of additional information, and we have a job board. There's a number of companies locally here in the Twin Cities that know what we do, that great people come and they have hired great people through Crossroads. So they post positions on our job board regularly. And so check that out. There's a lot of good things that get posted there. By the way, one thing I really love about these webinars is we have people that join us from all over the country. And usually there's 7 or 8 states of people on here. And I love the fact that we can broaden some of that. So some of the things we offer are online that you can participate in from anywhere, and other things are in person that obviously just work out best for people that are local. Everyone's welcome, obviously, to come up here, but if you're in Atlanta, you're probably not going to drive up here for a Crossroads event. But in any case, I want to make sure that you check out the website and see what you can take advantage of, and please do. Almost everything we do is absolutely free. We have volunteers that help us do everything that we offer, and I'm grateful for that. We are kind of cadence each month in terms of presentations like this is the first Thursday morning of each month is in person at Grace Church in Eden Prairie, and we have a presentation like this. We have our networking group that meets afterwards for everyone to be able to share contacts and leads and ideas with each other. And we have a micro job fair. We have anywhere from 1 to a few companies that might show up that to talk about positions that they have available. And so you can take advantage of that. And then we have somebody that talks about financial considerations during job transition as well, because for most people, it's not just about the job, but it's financial circumstances that they're in too. So we cover that. Second Thursday evening of each month is in person only at Woodbury Lutheran Church and on the other end of town. So I catch people on that side. And we have a presentation like this there. And then the third Thursday morning is what you're on now. We do an online webinar. So you can find all the details of upcoming presentations and time and registration and everything on our website, and take advantage of as many of those as you can. If you look at the calendar, the first Thursday of January happens to fall actually on January 1st. So we will not have a meeting in January, but the first Thursday in February will take place. The second Thursday evening in Woodbury will take place as well. On a weekly basis, there's a number of ways you can plug in otherwise as well. Our Networking with Grace group meets weekly. The first Thursday is always in person at Grace Church, but then every following Thursday is through a Zoom meeting online. And so you can participate from anywhere on that. And the information is on our website. You can check out the details there. They're actually going to be meeting here in a few minutes at 9 o'clock as well, but online. And so you can still jump on that if you want to go to the website and check that out. But every Thursday morning, they meet as well. You can participate in one-on-one coaching. If you'd like to talk with one of our volunteers about your situation, get some advice on a resume or an upcoming interview, or do mock interview practice, or get some new, fresh networking ideas, or anything else about your job search, feel free to fill out the form on our website for one-on-one coaching. One of our volunteers will reach out to you to set up a time for a Zoom meeting or a phone call, and you can talk through anything you'd like with them. And you can do that as often as you'd like, and that can be a great way to get some specific help for your circumstances that might be unique. We're a big believer in the power of prayer, and I'm grateful we have on our team people that love to pray for you. They pray for all of you in general, but if you have a specific prayer request, we have a page on our website, and they'll pray for you on that. If you feel like you need to talk through kind of the emotional roller coaster you're on and get some spiritual support from one of our volunteers on a little more regular basis, check out the information on our website for Soul Care, and you can send us an email through that, and we'll follow back up with you and set up a time for you to meet with somebody as well. The meat and potatoes, though, are the most in-depth help you can get is through our online classes. We have multi-week classes, usually 5 to 8 weeks, that are, as I mentioned, online, so you can participate from anywhere. And usually we do have people from multiple states on our classes. And we start a new one each month, but we cover every aspect of an effective job search, starting with attitude and getting in the right frame of mind, do some assessments so you can have greater self-awareness to be able to talk about yourself with greater conviction in your interviews. We talk a lot about networking and resumes, interviewing, and all kinds of different aspects. But I think as important as all the content we have, which is, I think, very strong and great strategies, I think it's having that weekly light accountability, getting together with others that are in the same boat and offer encouragement and moral support for each other. And we also explore what's God's perspective of your job search and your life through this process. I think as important as the content is just that encouragement and moral support you get, because as probably all of you have experienced, this is an emotional roller coaster, right? And so being more deliberate about having support is, I think, very important. And so we have new classes starting monthly. Then information's on our website. You can register there, and that's free as well. Take advantage of it. And I think our next class starts in January. We just had one start here earlier this week in December. We have a LinkedIn group. If you put in the search box on LinkedIn, MN Crossroads Career Network, you'll find us. Actually, if you put that in the search box, you'll find two things. One is our company page, which we ask that you follow that, because the more people we have following our company page, the more exposure we get online for people being able to find us. But if you also join our LinkedIn group, there's a lot of great things that get posted in there in terms of, there's recruiters that post jobs in there, there's upcoming events posted, there's advice that people post for each other. But as important is, we have, I think, approaching 3,000 people in there. I forgot the number now exactly, but and it's people that have been through Crossroads in the past, but remain in the group just to be available as a networking contact at the companies that they're at now. And so you can look through the members list and see who's might be working at a company you're targeting, and reach out to them and ask them for advice and insight into the organization. Maybe they might provide a referral or two or whatever. And then after you land, it's a great way to give back and be available to others as well. So check out the LinkedIn group, take advantage of that. This webinar and all of our previous webinars from the last few years are posted on our YouTube channel. If you put MN Crossroads Career Network in the search box in YouTube, you'll find us. And you can rewatch this webinar, but there's a ton of other great topics in there. So, curl up on a Friday night on your couch with a bucket of popcorn and watch job search videos. Maybe you might want to do something else, but it's a great resource for a lot of terrific topics and great speakers. So take advantage of that. If you're local, our next big thing coming up is once a quarter, we do a full day job search workshop at Grace Church in Eden Prairie, and it covers every topic for a job search that is drinking from a fire hose that day, but we provide lunch and workbook with all the presentations that you'll be seeing that day. It's the only one of the few things we charge for. There is a $20 fee for that in order to cover part of our costs. It actually costs us over $30 per person, but we offset that by charging $20 for each person. If cost is an issue for you and that would prevent you from coming, go to the website and see the registration information anyway. We do have scholarships available. We don't want anyone not to attend because of cost. And so check out the website. You can email us, and we're glad to provide a scholarship for you to be able to come anyway. But it's a great day of getting a ton of information and very practical strategies for you to put into place for your job search. And we also have a Q&A panel of recruiters and HR leaders that are there to answer any questions that you might have on your mind about the hiring process. And so it's a terrific day to be able to get a lot of information in one sitting. So join us. Information's on our website. There's a banner on the top of our homepage on the website to get you to the right page to see the details. And I hope you can join us on January 3rd. It's a great way to kick off your year with new information for your job search for the new year. I just want to acknowledge we have actually over 40 volunteers that help us doing all these different things with Crossroads. We're not able to do this with just a couple of people, and nobody's getting a paycheck. Everybody's giving of their time and expertise and giving of their effort in order to help others that they want to be of value to other people. And so I'm grateful for every one of them, and enables us to offer pretty robust offerings. As I mentioned, no meeting on January 1st. Happy New Year. Our next event will be at Woodbury, other than the workshop on January 3rd, but our next seminar will be at Woodbury Lutheran Church on 7 p.m. Thursday evening, January 8th. Glenn Sherling will be talking about career evolution or reinvention. If you're kind of trying to shift directions a little bit, he talks about his own experience doing that and how you can do that effectively. And if you don't have a church home, check out one of our churches, whether a Grace Church in Eden Prairie or Woodbury Lutheran Church. Certainly invite you to come in person, which is a better experience, but you can watch us online as well. And there's the websites. You can find out the details. I hope this was worthwhile for you today. And Melanie did a terrific job. I hope you can rewatch some of the webinar on the YouTube channel, but hope to see you at upcoming events. Hope you don't have to join us at upcoming events because you land a job quickly, but have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and hope to take advantage of the other things we offer through Crossroads. Have a great day.